Hi, welcome to the Expressed on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Rich Adrian-Smith. This podcast is on a journey to uncover the essence of full authentic expression, to support high achievers, entrepreneurs, and executives to reconnect with their life's purpose and live a rich life. I offer a novel path to move from dissatisfaction and anxiety into purpose, passion, and power. We'll be interviewing an intriguing array of intellectuals, thought leaders, facilitators, and guides who are being expressed on purpose, honing their crafts. And on today's episode, we'll be interviewing Dr. Erin Baker. There are times when you meet someone who really walks their talk, and Dr. Erin Baker is one of those people. As an executive and entrepreneur coach, social psychologist, and author of the best-selling Joyful AF, she is on a mission to bring back joy into its rightful place at the heart of business. They reveal how joy as an inner feeling can be accessed anytime, no matter the circumstances, and used as a compass for life. Erin introduces the 4 essential ingredients of joy: connection, curiosity, creativity, and courage, each a vital fuel for resilience, especially in challenging times. They explain that self-leadership is about guiding our inner parts with joy and curiosity, and they share insights on internal family systems as a path to embracing and integrating these parts, fostering self-compassion and stronger relationships. Erin emphasizes that true authenticity comes from accepting all aspects of oneself, even those we might consider flaws, and following joy even if it leads us away from societal norms. Their message? Embrace your individuality, let joy guide your decisions, and create deep, authentic connections by being fully yourself. Let's dive in. Welcome, Erin, to the show. Lovely to see you and connect with you again and to explore a bit of joy with you.
Yeah.
How are you doing to start with? How are you being today?
I am actually quite joyful. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since we talked about having it. So you can see in my sign is all lit up. I have a neon sign that says joyful, and that's like radiating out of me this morning.
Nice, beautiful. It seems to be a common place for you to explore from and journey through. And before we dive into all of the little areas I want to explore, I'd love for you just to kind of set the scene with who you are and what lights you up with joy, and just give me a bit of a flavor of who Erin Baker is.
Well, Erin Baker is a different thing every day, depending on what time of day it is. But right now, I would say Erin is a deep nerd of the human psyche. And I have been, for the last couple decades now, studying and learning about the human mind, first through academia, then in the tech world, and now as a coach, helping other people transform their lives. And a big, big component of what I do is tapping into my own joy and learning how joy can be a catalyst for so much impact and so much purpose, and also helping other people tap into their joy too, because it's the thing that people want most, and it's the thing they think has to come later or gets in the way of the success or the productivity or whatever. And so I'm here to rewrite the narrative for everyone. Joy first at the foundation, everything else follows.
Yeah, beautiful. That switch from I'll be happy when I have the goal into I'll be happy, then I'll have the goal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even I'll be joyful, right? Because actually happiness and joy are not the same thing, but people think it is.
Yes.
Right. So happiness is that fleeting feeling when we achieve something or we get something, right? So we get a promotion at work or buy a new car or get married. And what people are chasing is that feeling, that high that happens from that external circumstance. But what happens is it goes away. We all return to a baseline. Whereas joy is really this inner feeling, this inner resource that we don't need something outside of us to create. We can tap into at any time. And so what's happening is people are like, oh, I'll be happy when, but they're doing it miserably to get there rather than being, I'll be joyful now. And then maybe I might get that thing too, the promotion, the car, the marriage.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for that nuance. And that's definitely an area of curiosity which we've already talked about a little bit before, around this happiness versus joy. And you kind of touched on it as the joy state of being. And just what was coming up to me in my head there was we were spending a year in Bali, and there's a lot of locals there who don't really have very much on paper, and especially in comparison to the Western world, who seem to have all the material things you can possibly desire, and yet are miserable and isolated and struggling and not in their joy. There's just this curious nuance between how the external is depicted as what brings you happiness in the Western world, and we forget that that internal creation of joy comes from all the experiences that we go through. And there seems to be a real sense in culture right now of this avoidance of the discomfort.
Yes.
And a lack of ability to sit in that discomfort. And discomfort is this stepping stone into the next chapter. And following that joy on that journey is really powerful. So yeah, one thing I wanted to bring up early on is your 4 ingredients of joy. I think that's a really beautiful foundational pillar for this conversation. And so I'd love for you just to set the scene with what those pillars are. Yeah,
well, let me start with how I even came to it, which is I love to cook. And I have this book, and it's also a Netflix special called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And these are the 4 foundational ingredients of all good cooking. And so you think about salt's in everything, right? It has its own flavor, but it also, adds flavor to things. And then you have all these other things. And as I was doing my research, both in the psychology world, but also just anecdotally trying to understand what is joy to begin with, I kept hearing these foundational ingredients. Like everybody has a different recipe for joy. Like you can make your spaghetti joy or your, soup joy. But there's always these 4 ingredients that keep showing up. And so for me, the salt, fat, acid, and heat of joy are connection. So connection being connection to self, connection to others, connection to purpose, could be connection to a higher power. That's the salt for me. That's got to be in everything. And then curiosity, creativity, and courage. And the last one is one that people kind of look at me funny. Courage. How is courage about joy? Turns out the thing that is most joyless is when we set a goal and we get there without any challenge, without any obstacle. We are bored. We feel meh. So we actually need things that make us step into courage, that challenge us, that are risky, that are potential obstacles for us to feel joyful. And we're talking about discomfort a few minutes ago, and our inability to sit in discomfort. And discomfort is something that can create joy. So I love to highlight that 4th one, because I get all the time, I get looks like, what are you talking about, Erin? That does not resonate. And yet I'm not the only one who believes this. When I was doing my research, I was looking at how other people talk about joy, and courage kept coming up too. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it seems that nuance or link between courage and, from a nervous system perspective, the being in eustress, where you're not too relaxed and you're not too stressed, you're just activated in the sweet spot of flow, like you're playing sports or you're doing something you love or you're doing music. And that little sweet spot is you're just in flow, you're in the mode. And so courage is that sweet spot again of you're taking a step of through the discomfort, which requires some level of I can do this, belief, I got this. And it's not so much that it's like, holy shit, I'm never going to make it, despair. So it's kind of having that balance. And this is one of the topics that we talked about when I first kind of met you, because of the Rich Living intensive. I think it was 2 years ago now. You started the whole session by singing to the James Bond tune, the Rich Living theme. In front of like 300 people live, and you went for it and you smashed it. And I afterwards said to you, like, wow, that was amazing. You were so courageous in that moment. And you then came to me and said, yeah, it's a muscle. It's like working at the gym. It's building this courage muscle, getting your reps in so that your your preparedness grows. Yes. And someone else was saying to me about wanting to have confidence, and confidence is something comes when you have courage to take the steps. Yes. And so it kind of fits well with this joy aspect. Yeah. Well, and I will tell you that that song was such a joy to write. It was such a joy to perform. And 5 years prior me would have looked at you like you had three heads if you said, Erin, you're going to write a parody to a James Bond song and perform it in front of not only 300 people, but Rich's wife, who is a professional singer. But it was full of joy because I had built up over time all these little tiny acts of courage had filled up my joy tank. And at that point, it didn't matter if I messed it up. I didn't care. I was going to have so much fun. And it's one of my favorite moments of the last several years.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's kind of really a great point is again, the nuance of what we're getting out of the journey is the destination. And if you're putting all of your eggs into, when I reach that singular point, I'm expecting like a Disney Hollywood-esque fireworks to explode, red carpet to roll out, all of the things to happen in that moment. That's when you're going to be disappointed because your expectations are so high. Life is very challenged to meet it in that same way. And yet when we cultivate that on the journey, there's kind of the momentum of joy that you kind of flow with.
Yeah.
But the other areas, doing this podcast today with you, I was like, oh yeah, well, this is great. We're connecting. I'm connecting to myself. I'm curious. I'm courageously asking you questions, doing something that's new for me in the podcasting world. And we get to create something. We get to create a space where we're exploring a topic that's quite close to my heart, having been journeying through a lot of anxiety in my 20s, a lot of depression, a lot of unhappiness within the role that I was doing. And for me, this joy within the states of not elated emotion, i.e. joy within the states of things aren't really going very well, or things are challenging right now. I'm struggling. So maybe if you can talk a little bit about cultivating joy when the circumstances are a bit stickier, a bit more discomfort, a bit more heavy emotions.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say the thing I encounter most with people, especially when things are hard, whether it's in the world right now, or personally, it's that feeling of how dare I feel joy? How dare I? Or that doesn't make sense. A lot of us, especially thinking about bigger world events, feel like we need to be in the struggle with everybody else. And then, of course, when we're personally, whether it's personal life, professional life, things are not going well, it can feel really hard to find joy. And so there's a couple things I say. One is joy is fuel for resilience. It is what we need to get through. And I really took away from, there's a book by an author named Karen Walrond, and she writes in her book, it's called The Light Maker's Manifesto, How to Work for Change Without Losing Your Joy. And she talks about building up your reservoirs of joy all the time. And I talk about it in my book as your joy tank. Keep your joy tank topped off. It's not like a gas tank where, you run it down to empty and then you fill it up again. You always keep it topped off, because if you're constantly cultivating joy, when you hit those snags, first of all, you've built a muscle, right? We talked about the courage muscle. We've built the joy muscle. But those are those small reservoirs that keep you going. If you can find those slivers, even in the pain, the sorrow, the challenge, the discomfort, whatever you're experiencing, that's what keeps you through, keeps you going through. And it's not that we need to sit there and, bury our head in the sand and say, oh my gosh, I'm so joyful. Everything's burning around me. There's a meme I'm thinking of where there's a dog and everything's on fire and the dog's like, everything's fine. That is not what I'm saying. It's about being in the both and, acknowledging whatever the challenge is, whatever the pain is, and then also saying, can I find these tiny moments? And I encourage people to use the 4 ingredients quite a bit. Can I find a tiny moment of connection today? Can I find a tiny moment of curiosity, a tiny moment of courage?
Yeah, making those incremental steps to kind of climb back, and having that as the way to have some elasticity to your own internal world, so you can return back to where you want to be at. And also, as you said, respect the process that you're in. Because, there's a lot of prevalence in culture today of burnouts and of people, especially in the entrepreneurial world, hustling and grinding to try to get to their goal. And so, there's a sense, again, of this this wanting to get to the destination, being miserable along the way in order to reach that goal. And so that for me was a journey that I went through, which was very much linked into emotional baggage that I hadn't dealt with. And that felt like that was what was very heavy and holding me back. And I was just saying, I'm fine, I can keep going, I'm good. I had a lot of intellectual understanding of what self-growth and self-resilience and being joyful was, and yet it was all in my head and not in my body. And so for me, there was a deep sense of needing that action to shift my emotions, to allow myself to kind of rise up out of it. And so it's great, even in these ingredients of this taking action along with these kind of principles to support yourself to have these incremental steps out of where you might be, can be very powerful.
Very powerful. And I'm a lot of people are saying, well, it's so small. But one of the things I love to tell people is I love mountains a lot. And mountains are formed by these tiny earthquakes. Tiny earthquakes, the two tectonic plates come together, centimeters of earth moves, just centimeters. And over however millions of years, you can have Everest. And so what I encourage people is you may not be able to feel it or see it if you're doing a tiny act of joy every day, but believe that you're building the mountain, filling the tank, whatever metaphor fits your brain. At some point, you will look back and go, oh, wow, yes, I do feel more joyful. I do feel my tank is, and I'd say that for anything. It doesn't have to be just joy. Any kind of shift. The centimeters over time will create the mountain.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. It's the little drops that create the river that you don't really realize become a river because it was the one tiny drop that's the difference between
exactly
a tiny stream and a river. So it's that
right,
slow but steady, constant improvement over time, which again is kind of counter to our culture today, which wants everything immediately. Right. There's so much search for the magic pill.
Yeah, well, I always contrast it to how volcanoes form mountains. So volcanoes, people want these explosive, big changes, right? But volcanoes can't grow really tall. I think there's a couple thousand meters is how tall a volcano can grow, like a single volcano. There are some volcanoes in bigger mountain ranges, but like big mountain ranges go way taller. So explosive change, explosive whatever it is, actually can stunt things. And so I just like go back to the tiny earthquakes.
Yeah, great. I love the analogy. It's really easy to understand the small changes and over a long period of time just makes a big difference. That's great.
Yeah. And doing that from a place of joy can just be, again, I do the same thing when people are saying, well, I've created all my success. You're talking about hustle and grind, right? So I've created all this success. Yes, I've done it through miserabling it, but oh my gosh, if I stop doing it, it's all going to come crashing down, right? So when I'm working with my clients on how do we put joy at the foundation of whatever they're doing, it's these tiny changes. We're gonna try one thing, see how it happens, see how it goes. Now let's do the next thing. Now let's do the next thing. So it's very much a building the mountain type exercise to shift towards joy.
Yeah,
because that's the biggest complaint I hear, not complaint, but concern I hear from people is, what if everything comes crumbling down if I switch how I'm doing things? And I go, great. I personally know it won't, but I'm going to ease their nervous system, their brain along with tiny actions and tiny changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Just tiny, pushing the fold.
Yeah.
Kind of dipping your toe in. Okay. I'm going to keep going another step, another step.
Yep.
That's great. Exactly. Great way to transition for sure.
Yeah.
So does that kind of talking into self-leadership, which is this that I see a lot of where you position yourself. How do you link joy and self-leadership together in what you do and how you support people?
I love this question because they are similar things. So let me just go back and say part of how I define self-leadership, because that's a term that has lots of different opinions and definitions. For me, self-leadership is understanding all the parts of ourselves. We all have multiple parts. I have an overachiever part, a control part, a perfectionist part, and leading those parts from a place of curiosity, creativity, connection, courage. There's a few other C words that I like too that are part of a model called internal family systems that I really like. But yeah, that's the idea, is putting joy and those ingredients of joy first and helping. So, okay, Let me not create a goal from my perfectionist part or my overachiever part. Let me create a goal from curiosity. And then my perfectionist part can probably play a role. Maybe not be perfectionist, but try to do good quality work, or uh let me use my planning parts or my action oriented parts or whatever. But the idea is, yeah, coming almost, I like metaphors a lot. You'll notice, almost like having a conductor of a symphony, and I've got all these parts of me. I need to wrangle them to achieve my goals. And instead of the tuba running the show, I'm going to tell the tuba when to play. Or, okay, I've got the violin section is playing way too loud right now. Too much going on in my head. Okay, let's quiet it down. Let's see if somebody else can come to the table. And so when I'm working with clients, I'm looking at who's running the show, because a lot of them are draining your joy. And how do we then come back to helping them be led by you, your joy, your curiosity, your connection, you as the conductor. And I call it self. Internal family systems also calls it self, but your higher, wiser self, which is a naturally joyful state.
Yeah, beautiful. And yeah, I love internal family systems. It really was a big mindset shift to become aware of these different parts and how they're operating, and B, kind of giving that autonomy back to yourself to say, yes, I'm thinking these thoughts and they aren't me. They're just a part of me that thinks that. And now suddenly, I can just put that part of me that's pressuring myself or wants me to procrastinate aside, say, hey, I hear you, I love you, thank you. What do you all really need? What does the XR behind that part really need in this moment? And using that trail to say, there's a signal sign, like in a car, engine lights flashing. What is that? Let's trace it back to the origin and see what's really needed, rather than the potential that I've experienced, cross-wiring of things.
Yes.
Need comes up, you're wired to go this way, and that just puts the pattern on repeat.
Yeah. And when I'm working with clients, so I do a lot of visioning with people around where they want to go. And the way I like to do it is from a parts perspective. And I help people understand who internally is going to be on your list of roadblocks, who's going to try to, stop you from achieving whatever you're trying to achieve. And then who's going to be your inner resources, because we also forget a lot of the coaching that I have encountered in the past is around, how do we get you out of your own way? And that can really, unfortunately, get people to focus on all the ways they think that they're broken, not good enough, have to grit through their own blockers. And so I say, well, what if they're all useful? And let's also see, what are your resources that are going to help you achieve whatever. Let's make sure you're achieving a goal that's coming from that joyful, self-led place. And then from there, who on the inner team needs to be recruited, and who might show up trying to drive the bus, and how do we help them come back and be part of the team?
So just talking to that point, because I'm really curious of your approach with that. Do you have any tools or approaches of how you can help somebody shift when they're suddenly like, oh shit, I'm in the self-sabotaging part, I'm in the procrastinator, I'm in the protector, or even I'm in the firefighter, and I suddenly want to go and use all my coping mechanisms because I feel uncomfortable?
Yeah. So the immediate thing I tell people is, we're not our parts, right? So if we can just pause and say, oh, hi, part, right? It's all of a sudden it separates us. So, oh, hi, overachiever. I see you. What do you need? And it can be hard. So, because we're not all walking around looking for how we can be separate from our parts. Sometimes we're activated where, my overachiever is running the show. But if we can pause and notice and then say, oh, hi, part, what do you need? That's it. And sometimes that's just enough for it to go, oh, okay, calms down. And I do work every morning. A lot of people like to meditate to get rid of thoughts. I like to meditate to understand who's there. And so when I meditate, I listen for who's there that morning, and just, again, who's here? What do you need? So the more I spend time, the more I know who my parts are, and I can notice, oh, I've seen you before. Yeah. So I just build a relationship with them. But it takes some time and practice. Just, I would say, for anyone listening to this, if you're not even familiar with internal family systems, just the notion that you have parts of yourselves is just, that's a shift. Yeah. Be with that tiny centimeter of earthquake right there.
Yeah. The earthquake, in a sense of suddenly things are
Yes.
splitting, but also this idea of the individual parts, or the sum of the whole is greater than the individual
Mm-hmm.
parts.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow we need to have that separation to have the cohesion of all the parts to come together into the whole, rather than saying, I'm the overachiever and I'm going to run this bus because I've done it for so long and I've got all this
Right.
evidence to say of how doing my approach works and is important.
Yeah.
And that's the other piece, I guess, as well, is getting trapped into that thought pattern where you
Yeah.
believe it, you listen to it, and
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
engaged in it. You're saying, "Yeah, you're right, and that's me, and I have to follow this path."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I notice for me, the more I feel that taking over, the more I actually ask the part to sit outside of me, next to me. Sometimes I have it sit on the other side of the country, so I can
Nice.
really get separation and go, that's not me. That's just one part. But that takes some getting used to of, oh yeah, there are all these parts and they're all, you know, some of them are working together and some of them are working antagonistically and competing. And so what I think it helps it do, it might sound confusing to someone who's listening, like, oh my gosh, there's all these parts, but it actually is clarifying to me rather than having this jumble of everything
Mm.
in my head. If I can slow down and be like, oh, okay, there's a part of me that wants to procrastinate. Okay, let me spend some time with that part. Oh, now there's a part of me that really wants to just go, 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 right? And be productive. Oh, they're antagonistic to each other. Cool. Let's slow down and find out what's happening.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. That's slowing down, taking the time to really listen to these parts of you. And I kind of use the analogy of treat them as though they were young kids in
Yes.
your space, and that's kind of
Yes.
what they are because that's where they were formed. And so
Yes.
then treating them like that with compassion and curiosity and holding space rather than saying, stop being such a brat, you're making a
Yeah.
mess. And now you're pushing them
Yeah.
away and there's that whole resistance. It's instead,
Yes.
hi,
Yeah.
tell
And
me.
that's a revolutionary concept for certain parts of us because there are parts of us, right, that we do not want. We don't like them. We want to push them away.
Mm,
You know, I'm thinking a lot of people don't want their shame part. There's multiple parts that feel shame, right? Or parts that, you know, say a procrastinator or something that gets in the way. And so what people want to do is even a lot of traditional personal development will talk about like quieting these things or, you know,
mm,
like quiet your inner critic or get rid of your inner critic. And I have another philosophy. So I'm going to use another metaphor, but it's like holding a kickboard in a swimming pool underwater. And if you've ever had a kickboard under you in a swimming pool, that is very effortful. And that's what's happening at an unconscious level if we're trying to get rid of these parts, is that we are holding, holding, holding. And what's going to ultimately happen at some point is it's going to slip out from under and it's going to pop you in the face. And
mhm,
that's when parts take over for us and we go, oh, shoot, what just happened?
mhm,
Right? So I say, welcome them. Welcome them to swim right next to you.
mhm,
Hi, shame. Welcome. Hi, inner critic. Welcome.
mm.
Sit next to me. What do you want to tell me?
Yeah, yeah, it's a really powerful practice. I really love
Yeah.
having sessions with people and kind of using it in my own mind and kind of guiding people through it as well. It's really a powerful process. So if anybody listening, go and find out more about Erin and IFS
Yeah.
or internal family systems and explore that world. It's really
It's
empowering.
changed it's
Yeah.
changed my whole world. And I will say it's changed every relationship in my life too, because
Mm,
now when I'm walking around being compassionate and curious about my parts, I can see that in other people too. And so if someone behaves poorly with me, that doesn't mean I condone their behavior, but I can go, oh, I can see a part. I have a lot more compassion. And then even I went through a very friendly divorce last year and we talked in parts language and it made
mhm,
everything
mm,
smoother because when I'd say a part of me is angry about this, it's very different than I'm angry about this, right?
yeah.
Or some days it'd be a part of me, I'd say a part of me is angry and a part of me is really excited. And we would have these great conversations about holding all these opposites as we were separating. And it was
Mhm.
because we had that language
Yeah,
that things really smoothly went. So,
yeah, well, I'm happy to hear that for you, firstly.
yeah.
Um, And also, I feel like this is the essence of this podcast really is a journey into authenticity and expressing on purpose. And so what you're kind of
Yeah.
talking to there, I think is a really important point with that. And it's bringing these parts of us into connection with others is a way to dissolve the shame around it.
Yes.
So there's not shame compiled on top of the emotion, so that I feel sad and now I feel shameful about feeling sad, so I'm just going to push
Right.
that back. Instead,
Right.
to say, I'm going to face shame head on by telling you that I feel sad, and I'm not entirely sad, but there's a part of me that feels sad. And
Yeah.
that disidentification with the part and the ability to bring it into connection and hold it with the person creates, in my opinion, a very deep, authentic connection with that person that, as far as I've seen, often disarms the other person from wanting to be defensive or attack you, because they say, oh, I see you have that part. You're not pushing that part at me. We're just both looking at this part right now. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, I would love for you maybe to talk more about authenticity in that space as well, in what authenticity means to you. And this
Yeah.
concept I have of full authentic expression is something
Yeah.
I'm really exploring. So I would love for you to share about that.
I will. And just one thing I want to say as you were talking about that is, when we're talking about parts, if we're trapped in a part, it's going to be a magnet for someone else's parts. And so that's why
Mm,
there's
mm,
so much disconnect in the world, is everybody's walking around with parts driving the bus
mhm,
and they're magnets for each other. So, um, and it's pulling on everybody's wounds, right? And
mm,
so just what you're talking about is pulling out a part and saying, hey, let's look at that part. That's coming from a more self energy, which is a more compassionate, curious place. And that begets compassion and curiosity in the other person.
mhm. Yeah, beautiful.
So just as you talk about that, that to me is the key to connection, and much larger purpose in my mind around how do we bridge divides is
Mm,
using more of this language. So authenticity for me, this is a word that I am constantly exploring for
mhm,
myself. But for me, authenticity really is about how do I welcome every part of myself?
mhm,
And that can be a tough thing at times when these parts are, again, things I don't like about myself, or they're not, acting in the world in alignment with how I want to be. But I do believe in this concept that none of our parts are bad. They're just trying their best to keep us safe. And so authenticity for me is starts from within. And I talk about authenticity and inclusion are kind of similar concepts for me when I look inward. And it's my most authentic expression is the one where I'm not hiding any part of myself from myself. And so that's going to be a lifelong exploration because there are thousands of parts of me, but it's that willingness to not hide, and then the willingness to then with others show that side of me and express that side of me. I often tell people that the deepest points of connection are the things we're hiding about ourselves,
mm. Yeah.
right? And so we're a human race walking around hiding, trying to not show our shadow selves, our bad parts, whatever we want to call it. And yet all that does is disconnect us, because then we're walking around feeling like I'm the only one.
Mm,
I'm the only one that struggles with this, or I'm the only one who feels vulnerable about this. And yet the minute we share, people go, oh, I'm not alone. Me
mhm,
too. So to me, authenticity is, yeah, that full range and sharing all of it. But again, starting with yourself
mhm,
and allowing for it to be kind of confusing inside too, I will
mm,
say. So what I mean by that is I have such opposing parts at times that even just in my gender identity, that's a really easy one. I have a lot of masculine, I have a lot of feminine. I don't fit a box. That's because I've got a lot of both in me, and sort of
mhm,
holding that tension of, oh, I can be both and then any other parts of me. So to me, authenticity is about how do I hold space for all the contradictions and paradoxes and shifts in identity. Identity shifts all the time. Oh, okay, this set of parts is going to be more expressive for a while, or this set of parts is going to be more expressive for a while.
yeah, that's it's a curious topic for me around bringing these parts out, and in the way that we can do that in our society, or in the way that we can create space for others. And so I'm on again this curious exploration of professionalism, and
Mm,
this phrase that has come up a few times in my entrepreneurial ventures of um, it's not personal, it's just business.
Mm,
And for me, it's kind of the flip is that it's not business, it's just personal. And I'm wondering how you support people or how you approach bringing this authenticity into the professional space and how you can
mhm.
bring these aspects of ourselves that may want to express in a certain way, but that might not be appropriate in certain settings, and how you would go about navigating those kind of instances.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is just even getting clear on what situations different parts are going to be best resources in or useful in, right?
Hmm.
So the part that likes to swear like a sailor might not get to show up in a meeting with a high-powered CEO. Maybe. I mean, depends on if the CEO and I are, have a certain rapport, but that doesn't mean that I'm not being authentic. It's just that I'm asking that part to take a step back and watch from the sidelines during that meeting. And then, okay, part, where is that? Where are you, free to show up? So when people think about authentic expression, I often hear people get really nervous about this idea because they think that all of them have to show up everywhere all the time.
Mm.
And that to be your most authentic self, there's no filter, right? It's
Mm.
just all the parts all the time. And to me, it's no, accept all these parts exist. Which ones are going to be, you know, most useful to you and your goals, whatever that goal is, connection, success, professionalism in that context? And how can you, from a self-led place, help those parts show up in their best
Hmm.
expression? And if there are parts that have to hide, let's say I'm thinking about um, gender identity or queerness, right? Then you get to make a decision. Do I want to work in a space where I have to hide parts of myself, right? Or, is it okay because for this time of day, I'm fine hiding this set of parts of myself because the rest of the time I'm free and open.
Hmm.
But it comes from that like place of intention and really getting clear. Who can show up in this situation? Who's not appropriate? How do I feel about that?
Yeah.
Can I make sure those parts get their airtime in other places if they have
Mm.
to take a back seat?
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. What two words that come into my mind right now is fluidity and dynamism, and it's really
Yes.
this transition between these different spaces, and that being authenticity, that being
Yes.
the relevant response for the scenario. Again, kind of talking nervous
Mm-hmm.
system. There's a lot of kind of fight or flight or freeze when this scenario doesn't actually dictate that, but your inner world believes that's what's needed to keep you safe, or that's the only possible
Right.
response. And that then
Right.
creates inauthenticity as far as I'm concerned, because there's this level of I'm now in this habitual state of under expressing myself. And
Right.
as a people pleaser or as someone from the
Yep.
UK growing up as kind of trying to fit in and be a good boy, there's an under expression aspect of it where so many areas are subdued. You have to let some parts rise up. And
Yes.
from my experience, kind of swing the opposite way and kind of experience, oh, now I'm going to let my anger out. Now I'm going to let my rage out, and I'm going to see the pendulation of where it's going to land and what then feels like, okay, this is actually me being in my power, holding firm boundaries. This is me overpowering someone, and this is me being disempowered. And kind of, you have to go through that journey of exploration to find that spot that's right for you, with the caveat being that, yeah, sometimes you're going to be riled up and acting in a way that doesn't feel as authentic as it you might like to be. And that in itself is kind of an authentic expression as well. It's kind of like, wow, I've reacted in a big way right then. I was triggered. I can talk about that part because I feel safe enough in myself that I can bring the identification out of that.
Yes.
And that for me is kind of a journey on this, again, expression concept within the British society or the entrepreneurial world, where people aren't expressing themselves fully, and we're missing out on all of these beautiful, amazing parts that are hiding in the shadow.
Yeah. What I often do with people is I help them recruit their parts into an experiment. and say, can we design an experiment when we go test some of the waters, the things you're most afraid of, right?
Mm.
So if I'm, you know, too big, people will not like me. If I let my anger out, this will happen, right? And I said, let's design some experiments where we just go test the little notch up and see. And so I would say, let's say I'm really afraid of my rage, right? And say, great. Well, let's not go do that with your boss, but like, let's find somebody who's safe in your world that you might be able to next time they trigger you, test out how it is to get the rage out.
Hmm.
And we'll do that with all kinds of different beliefs or fears. And so I love this idea of collecting data. Data can be neutral. And we're not asking the part to go off the deep end and then risk the thing that it's trying to protect from. We're saying,
Mm.
okay, if this is a 10 out of 10 scary thing, let's go back to a 2. What's the next thing the part could try that's a 2?
Hmm.
Maybe it's expressing in a meeting disappointment, or even just expressing in a meeting, right?
Mm.
Maybe, when I get mad, I shut down. So maybe the part can just go, oh, let me try like just saying something.
Yeah, it's the thing that's coming to my mind right now is approaching life from this experimentation or a classroom. Is what am I here to learn
Yeah.
today? What can I test
Yeah.
in this environment? What's my
Yes.
hypothesis? Can I take this
Yes.
little step and just see what happens? My whole world isn't
Yeah.
going to explode if suddenly I'm more empowered, more angry in a circumstance. But what I
Yeah.
found with that journey is again this magnetism you talk about, this kind
Hmm.
of this attraction or like kind of reaction that people have of, oh wow, like that's what's going on inside of you. I had no idea, because you never react like that normally. And so
Yeah.
then I don't know who was said the saying, but communication is about making sure the person understands what you mean, not just that you've said what you mean,
Right.
because you need to have that reciprocation in that. Um, so yeah, that's definitely a curiosity around testing. That's a lovely
Yeah.
experiment.
Yeah. And it's also joy, because what is experimentation
Yeah,
but curiosity and courage? We've got
yeah,
two of the ingredients right there.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. And it's definitely a great opportunity to flex that joy muscle as well and really
It
see
is.
what it's like
Yeah.
and what the reaction is and what it feels like in that journey. And for me, a lot of that journeying was like, wow, actually I feel alive in that moment. And there's that curiosity around, okay, wow, I feel alive being actually in my anger, because I've never allowed myself to be in that anger. And I think within the depression state, there's a lot of this. The word is as it sounds. You're depressing. You're pushing something
Mm.
down, and there's some studies that say depression is because of a lot of suppressed guilt, and
Mm.
so that piece that needs to kind of rise through, and also suppressed anger as well. And so those two things need to come out because your boundaries have been
Hmm.
pushed. And yeah, incremental steps being a powerful journey on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. There was another piece I wanted to explore, and it was this idea of using joy as a compass, using joy
Mm.
as a indicator to help you get clarity on the direction in life where you might not be able to see many steps ahead, you might not be sure of where you're going exactly, but then connecting
Mm.
to your joy as the path.
Yeah, that's a scary one for a lot of people.
Hmm.
What do you mean I don't have a plan? Well, I tell people that yeah, you don't need a why, you don't need a how, you don't need a what, really, you
Hmm.
just need joy.
Hmm.
And what I love about that is there's a couple things I could go a couple directions with this, but what really strikes me is there's so much possibility and opportunity out there that we're not aware of because we're following a plan. We've created a map of the
Hmm.
world, and whether that's goals or something else, we have a map of how things go, and so we get kind of rigidly stuck in it. And then we get really tight about it, right? We get, okay, I'm gonna go after it. And that's where the miserabling happens. And I find I'm gonna use this concept of magic beans because it's really been present for me the last couple of days because something a magic bean that I planted in 2020 seems to be coming full circle right now.
Hmm.
But this idea of when I follow my joy, right? I go do the things, whether it's business or personal, that light me up. I'm always planting some sort of, a lot of people call them seeds. I hate seeds as a concept because that acts as if you know what you're putting in the ground and you know
Mm.
when it's going to grow, but you're planting a bean and you have no idea if that'll turn into something, when it'll turn into something, or what opportunities exist. But it allows you to expand past this map of the world that you already have because there's so much more. This idea of there's the map is not the territory of what's
Mm.
possible. And so I find the more I follow my joy, the more interesting opportunities create themselves for me. And I'm
Mm.
just thinking right now about um, I'm going to be part of an LGBT fashion week in May. I don't,
Mm.
it's an opportunity, has nothing to do with my business, but I'm going to follow it because it sounds joyful.
Mm.
And this magic bean that came back around just this week, I went to a conference in 2020 right before the pandemic, and I'm now going to this networking event on Thursday. And the guy who runs it happened to have been at the event back in 2020, and we have
Mm.
similar people in common. I can see already some interesting conversations and opportunities that will arise because I have the context of that conference 4 years ago now. And so I always encourage people because I the biggest things that have changed in my life have been from following my joy. And so much of us, I mean, we want certainty. We want a plan. We want to know what's happening. I mean, how many people are talking about their 5-year plan, their 3-year plan? And yes, we can't just completely not have any future focus. But if we stick too tight to that future focus, we really do miss the opportunity for really interesting things to unfold for us.
Mm.
So I say tune into your joy.
Yeah.
And even when people have lots of opportunities thrown at them, there's a lot of, it's so easy. Say you've got 5 different paths you could go down. It's so easy to go down the shoulds and try
Mm.
to like future plan. Well, if I go down this path, then this will happen, then this will happen, and that's going to create success. Maybe those will happen. But what if you just followed your joy and trusted that all the opportunities can create success and the most fun you're going to have is a joyful path?
Yeah, it's so counterintuitive to how we've been educated or how I've been
Mm-hmm.
educated. It's kind of amazing, but
Mm-hmm.
this is also again in the whole body coaching that I do, and it's really to look at the mind, the body, and the soul. And for me, this joyful compass is an indication of how closely you're aligned with the soul's path, which way it wants to go.
Mm-hmm.
The soul
Yeah.
wants to express in its full way, and the
Yeah.
ego is there to try to give some structure to it, to say, no, we've got to keep the structure and I've got to keep this all held in place. And the soul kind of blasts through and says, I want to express fully. And then this ego comes, no,
Yeah.
hold back. I want to go fully. And there's this dance, this oscillation with joyful and then trying to contain it all. And yeah, for me, this spiritual path, i.e., connection to self, being the spiritual path, and self being connected to wherever we come from, power, divinity, however you want to label it, and our emotions being this indication system, this magnetic
Yeah.
compass, and feeling bad. There's only really 2 types of emotion. There's feeling positive and there's feeling negative.
Negative.
Pleasure,
Yeah.
pain, fear, love. And so with joy as that inner compass, it's really one of these higher vibrational emotions. And I
Yeah.
wonder what your link is with love, following what you love to do and following joy, and how you see those two come together.
Yeah, I think following what you love to do is one of the pieces of joy.
Mm-hmm.
I say there's the 4 foundational ingredients, but there's a lot more to
Mm-hmm.
joy. And I think, yeah, following the things you love, the things that you're best at. I talk a lot with people about this idea of zone of genius, the
Mm-hmm.
things that come easy, the things that feel in flow. And I think what oftentimes gets mistaken with joy is people think, oh, if I follow my joy, I'm not going to be productive anymore. I'm just going to like sit and watch the sunset. Or I
Mm-hmm.
have a friend who pictured herself eating McDonald's on the couch.
Yeah.
And joy is not, I mean, that might be your joy in the moment, but over
Mm-hmm.
time, what joy really is following the things that light you up. And the
Yeah.
things that light you up are typically the things that you feel connection to and that you feel curious about and that you're willing to step into courage for and feel creative flow, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, following what you love is part of this bigger picture of joy for sure.
Yeah, beautifully said. And the image comes up for me of this dream that I feel like we've been promised of get to retirement and then you have margaritas on the beach and that's going to
Hmm.
be joyful and happy and that's all the things you want in life. And the truth is that I experienced some of that a couple of years ago when I exited my business and I was living off dividends and I was like, what I want to do is get paid and not work. And the truth is, in that space, it can be a very beautiful experience for some months when you're kind of readjusting from being stressed and pressured all the time. But very quickly, you come into the state of, I need something more in my life. There's a part of me that
Hmm.
feels empty right now, that isn't full.
Yes.
That joy tank, that purpose, that fulfillment aspect is craving something more than just
Yes.
sitting back. Even though my ego wants to be totally comfortable and just watch Netflix and just hang out, my soul wants to come through and say, I'm meant for more than just that. And
Yes.
yeah, I saw some studies on the impact that retirement and selling businesses has on, in particular, men when they get older, because their entire identity is formed around, I'm the man, I work for the family, and this is how I bring value to the world. You take that
Yep.
away from them, and suddenly they're, what do they do? Who are they being? How do they bring themselves to the world? And there's a state of getting lost in just watching TV and just going on trips and not really being
Hmm.
present and just kind of getting into the numbness of repetition. And this is then where the joy needs to come through to say, let's just take a courageous act into something that's a bit edgy,
Yes.
and then it's going to start
Yes.
firing up again. Um,
Hmm.
there's a great psychologist I follow, James Hollis, and he basically switched into psychology when he was 50. And he retrained at
Wow.
50, and then he's now 70, 75, and he's written like 20 books. He does talks, and he just loves doing what he does. He just constantly
Yeah.
pushing the boundary of the human mind and understanding from Jungian psychology. And I think that that is also a great reflection of it's never too late to start something new. It's never too late
No.
to follow your joy and to go at it again. You don't need to feel like
Yep.
you're entrenched in like, but I've spent so long going down this path. How can I possibly switch? Because if your body is guiding you that way, there's something that it knows that you consciously can't logically compute. And this is an important
Yes.
part of listening to your whole body to say, what is it you're trying to guide me to? I'm curious about where that direction takes me. And I found personally, you quite quickly have confirmations of that direction. You quite
Yes.
quickly feel into, wow, that magic bean quickly
Hmm.
sprouted a shoot. And I was like, holy shit, where did that
Yeah.
come from?
Yep.
And that's being in the flow of life for me. And life is constantly trying to be abundant, constantly trying to grow. And it's for you to stop holding on to this rock of self-doubt and shame and shadow, which is holding in this stream, and let go and suddenly go down this flow of joy and life and realize that there's so much more on this journey than what you think
Absolutely.
it should be.
Very well put. I couldn't agree with you more on all of that. And I
Mm.
like this idea of, yeah, being in the flow and surrendering to your joy is
Hmm.
kind of what came to my mind.
Yeah, and that's uncomfortable somehow. And yeah,
Yeah, it is.
I'm so if I'm understanding your mission and your vision now is to support people to be in joy, to support people surrender
Yes.
to that joy and really come
Yes.
back down to this truth of the flourishing of life that happens as a result of when we let go of the egoic
Yeah.
shoulds, let go of
Yes.
identifying with these parts and allow this
Yes.
joyful aspect of our entire creation to come through.
Yes. And I'm mostly doing it with people who are deeply wanting to do something impactful or have
Mm.
purpose or have lost purpose. And it's easy to get tight and out of the flow of and be so focused on the bleeding heart side of the purpose to forget about the joy. And so I'm working with a lot of
Mhm.
people who are doing really cool things in the world and saying, I want you to keep doing those cool things for as long as possible. And so what's going to keep you doing those cool things? Joy.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a great sentiment to live by and a great direction to go forwards.
Yeah.
As we wrap up here, I like to finish the sessions by asking a question, and that is, if you could only share the next statement with the world and you were remembered by that statement, what would it be?
Oh boy, that's a big question.
Just to
All
drop
right,
that
I'm
on
gonna
right at the end.
I'm gonna drop a quote that has nothing to do with me, but it brings me a lot of joy. It's the in the epilogue of my book, and my camp counselor when I was 13 years old said everybody can dance. They just have their own rhythm and style. And I recently went to an ecstatic dance party and watched that in action, real life. Ecstatic dance is basically music is on, nobody's talking, and people just dance to their own rhythm and style. And I have never seen so much joy in a room. And so, what if everybody just walked through the world dancing their own dance to their own rhythm and style? And that's what created a joyful AF world.
Beautiful. Great. Well, thank you so much, Erin, for sharing your wisdom and your explorations of joy and IFS and everything we've gone through. If people want to find out more about you, where's the best place to do that?
Yep, they can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm mostly starting to play now. So I think I'm Erin Michaela Baker. And my website, erinmbaker.com. And then my book, Joyful AF, is on Amazon. But make sure to spell it Joy, F-U-L-L, because it means something different than just the regular old joyful.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And yeah, I can highly endorse the book. Amazing read. Great if you're in business or if you're just exploring your own personal direction. It's a really empowering book to shift the perspective on how we approach life and creation.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you found some nuggets of wisdom that you can take away and start implementing in your own life. If you did, then it would mean a lot to me if you gave the show 5 stars and subscribed. That way you can come back for more next week and help spread the word. And if you really loved it and you want to find out more about how to work with me and how I can help you, then check out the links below or head over to my website, www.richadriansmith.com. And if this is bye for now, then I wish you a rich life.